with the tar sands up here in Canada, one of the reasons it wasn't developed early was because to get 1 barrel of energy out, you had to put 2 barrels of energy in, and so that simply didn't work. And but the other thing with the ethanol, when it's burned, it produces more CO2 than fossil fuels. And nobody talks about that. And they say, well, how do they get away with this? Well, what they do is they say, well, yeah, it does, but when you're growing the crops, that takes CO2 out of the atmosphere, so we'll give you the net difference, which makes then the biofuels look more CO2 friendly. So it's just all if you know anything about these things and start looking at the numbers, you start to see how they manipulate. But just a quick comment about Exxon. I mean, at the height of their donation to climate research, and to my knowledge, they never gave any to primary climate research. All they were looking at was what are these climate scientists saying. They spent $16 million, which is peanuts. I think somebody worked it out as 0.07% of their wealth. But would you invest in a company who was in energy field, and what determines the effectiveness of that company was the climate, and they were not going to look at the climate? I mean, it's so ludicrous, but it's a measure of the bullying.
All right, we're back. This is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks, and our guest is Dr. Timothy Ball. He is a former professor at the University of Winnipeg in Manitoba, and we are talking about ClimateGate. And Dr. Ball, I don't know if we ever really discussed exactly. I mean, do we know to what degree those emails? You know, I look at all of I've got the file here, and what we're talking about is over 1,000 emails. I guess ranging from 1996 to 2009, maybe even beyond, beyond. It's 2009 now. So the point is that we're talking about literally hundreds of emails. But I've read a few of them, but I haven't been able to go through these emails to a large degree. But I'm looking at people like Monbiot out of Britain, who is very distraught. He's a big-time environmentalist in writing in one of the papers over there, and he's just absolutely blown away by these emails. And then you have other people as well. Can you address what's so damning about these emails?
Is that the two things that they've worked on? One is fear. Michael Crichton wrote a wonderful book on that, State of Fear. And in that book, the science of climate is very, very accurate. And the reason is because Crichton was a roommate of Richard Lindzen at Harvard when they were students. And Lindzen, I suspect, provided Michael Crichton with that. So fear has been played on. The sky is falling, the standard doom and gloom scenario.
So they're discussing in there about how to drum up the fear of the public. Okay.
Oh, yeah. The second thing that they played on, which Crichton didn't really talk about, is people's lack of understanding of climate science. And that's why when you read those emails, unless you know the science as I do, unless you know the history of these things and how they've gone on, they seem relatively innocuous. However, the things that do leap out at you are the criminality. That when somebody says, "Look, we're going to adjust this record to get the result that we want, and we're going to trick it up," and all of these other things, and then the attacks on anybody that dared to question the manipulation of peer review. They even got an editor fired because the editor at the Geophysical Research Letters didn't agree with them. And it goes beyond that because they also set up a website called Real Climate. And this was done, and the emails talk about this, this was done to basically act as henchmen for these criminals. And one of them, just to give you an example of the degree to which these people went, one of the people at Real Climate, who was on the IPCC originally, he's now in private business, is a fellow by the name of William Connolly. Mm-hmm. And Connolly got editor control over many web issues on Wikipedia. And he has a group of people who monitor Wikipedia all the time, and they've written anything that relates to climate, IPCC and all this stuff, they've written it in what they want out there. And if you go in and change it, as I've tried to do, within 20 minutes, half an hour, it's changed back. And, of course, you could only make 3 changes, but because they've got a cadre of people, and I use that term deliberately, they control. And, of course, so if you as a student were type in ocean tides or CO2, bang, you get what William Connolly, who represents the CRU gang, wants you to get. And, of course, they've designed it so that if you Google, Wikipedia response almost always comes up first. Exactly. So that's the degree to which they've manipulated the information.
Yeah, speaking of Wikipedia, I've read recently where some of the stuff that they are doing over there, because they're big-time environmentalists at Google as well, the founders, and my understanding is that they've been, at least it's been suggested, maybe I should put it that way, that they are altering search results now when somebody puts in something like ClimateGate or some key search that used to return results telling the truth. They've now altered it so that there's other things that dispute it.
Okay, what you need, I'll just make one comment. Gore is on the board of Google.
Oh, wow. Well, there you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
there you go.
And so it's more than just follow the money. It's follow who's in the positions and of influence and that, as we talked about earlier with the IPCC, that they make sure they control the critical parts of it.
One of the things that I've heard, and maybe you can confirm or rebuff this, but it was my understanding that Kenneth Lay, the former head of Enron, had something to do with establishing or developing this cap-and-trade model. Can you address that?
We talked, Darren. We talked earlier about what came out of Kyoto was this carbon credits. Mm-hmm. That originally started because some of the countries that were involved in Kyoto were trying to get the U.S. to sign the Kyoto Accord. And one of the things that's, again, the political machinations here, if Russia hadn't have signed, the whole thing would have died. And I listened to and spoke briefly with Ilarionov, who was Putin's advisor, economic advisor, and he gave an excellent speech in Vancouver and said, we're not going to sign this as scientific rubbish. And 2 months later, Putin signed. And Putin came out and said, go back and read this for yourself, he came out and said, look, I signed because I was told that if I didn't sign, then these countries wouldn't support our application to join the World Trade Organization. In other words, it's out-and-out blackmail. But back to the carbon credits thing, one of the things that they said, look, to the U.S., what do you want to be willing to sign this? The Americans came back and said, look, we want credit for the CO2 we're taking out of the atmosphere through agriculture, through forestry, and so on. They came back and said, well, we can't do that because we don't know how much CO2 is going in and out of the forests, which is an incredible statement when you're saying you know everything about it, okay? Mm-hmm. And so that was where the carbon credits idea came up. It was set aside, but Gore, again at the center of it, saw this, and Ken Lay saw this. There was a meeting in the White House in 1998 with Bill Clinton, Al Gore, Lord Brown of British Petroleum, and there's the energy companies in there again, and Ken Lay of Enron in that meeting, at which they said about how they were going to put this carbon credits thing into a wider audience and make it a money maker. And, of course, Enron, of course, used that and the alternate energies. I mean, a lot of the problems that California has now is because of what Enron did to their energy budgets and so on. Mm-hmm. And that definitely happened. And, of course, Gore's gone on to make millions off of the carbon credits.
Oh, and he continues to do so. And that's another major reason why, I mean, but why do people believe him? I mean,
of course, people are not believing him more and more. And again, you go back to John Daly, and I mean, Gore's become the target of it. But but of course, what they do is they move the goalposts again. So now we got cap and trade. It's the same old carbon credits and carbon tax, but cap means, you're going to cap this nasty pollution. Well, CO2 isn't a pollutant, and